and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie, and today I am once again joined by 5 excellent customer experience analysts to run through all the latest news from the space. Yesterday, I am delighted to be joined by Liz Miller, the VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, Rebecca Wettemann, the CEO and Principal Analyst at Valoir, Michael Fauscette, the Founder, CEO and Chief Analyst at Arion Research, Simon Harrison, Founder and CEO of Actionary, and Martin Schneider, the Head of Research at Annuitas Research. So thank you all very much for joining me, and let's get right into the news. And let's start with the big news coming from last week's NICE Interactions event, and that is the announcement of the NICE CXone Mpower platform, which groups its CXone platform with its Enlighten Copilot, AutoPilot, and Actions solutions. That's its generative AI solutions. Now, NICE described this as the holy grail of CX, but it'd be great to know what all of your thoughts are. I don't know, Rebecca, if you maybe want to start on this one.
Sure. So along with Holy Grail, I always hear alarm bells when people say things like first and only, which means they either don't know their market or there's not a market. That said, this seems like a combination of some pretty good tools and capabilities. But the thing that struck me in looking at this announcement and a lot of the other announcements that we've seen from these kind of CCaaS folks this year is we're still trying to figure out how we move to some kind of consumption-based pricing model. And some kind of model that takes into account that a lot of the workloads are now going to something that aren't tied to a seat. And I think everybody's still kind of struggling with this across. If we look at what Verint's done, we look at what Genesis has done, all of these folks are looking at how do I bundle this packaging in so I can get people to try the AI stuff while trying to shift away from something that doesn't get me so tied to butts and seats, because those butts and seats are not going to be what's driving the volume of workflows moving forward.
But isn't it funny that like the rest of like the cloud industry, like I always kind of look at who's tried this before and is kind of failing miserably, or like all the trains are falling off the track. And it kind of feels like we have a really good example in like cloud in general, where people are like, oh, well, maybe I don't want to go down that path. Maybe I don't want to go down the consumption path, but almost more importantly, maybe I don't want to go down the platform path, because maybe the market isn't in a mood for the age-old message of rip and replace, right? Because as we see everyone in, whether it's in the broader CX space, whether it's in the cloud space, whether it's the SaaS space, everyone seems to be leaning back, like the pendulum seems to be swinging back into this whole suites over platforms, suites win the day. Like every time everyone allows Larry Ellison to go talk about anything, it's like suites. We saw the same thing at Sapphire. It was suites over everything. And here we are in contact center saying, okay, we're going to be the CX platform. And I always wish someone would be like ... in the contact center, but no one ever seems to. But anyway, that's besides the point. But everyone seems to be kind of be going back to this messaging and back to this idea of we've done all the plumbing for you. Ergo, you just want to buy this whole thing that drops just in and it's perfect and it's amazing and it's just going to work. When was the last time anyone saw that actually happening in cloud? Like when did that work?
I will say there are a couple of things that in the announcement that I thought were interesting, but I will give you, Rebecca and Liz, that I looked through the pricing and I have no idea what they're doing. But the two things that I thought were really interesting was this idea of continuous memory, right? Because that's a big problem and has been a problem forever.
Sure.
The idea that I am who I am through any interaction with you, and you know everything about the other interactions I've had. That's really important. And then the second one is this idea of interconnected data, which we've all been talking about for ages, but it is important to tie the data in the back end together. Now, to Liz's point, there are other systems there that have to be interconnected too to make this work. But I just thought those two things jumped out. I think are interesting, and if that plays out, that is in fact an advantage.
Well, yeah, it's like the CRM companies have been probably better at getting to that with the AI story.
True.
Than call centers who have not had that CRM angle for like far too long. And I've been scratching my head about this for how long have I been doing this kind of work, right? And you think about it, and to both Liz's point, which was really, I think on point, it's like, yeah, we can measure, we can meet, we can do all these types of things in the cloud. Like Amazon's proven that, Snowflake has kind of proven that you can do these usage-based things. But is this what we should be? Is AI and the kind of things that they're talking about now the things that should make that change? Where actually you're even seeing like Oracle say like AI is free, it's a feature, it's something that we just want to bundle in to actually validate the pricing of some
everything
of these,
else.
Of everything else.
Yeah.
And then and to Mike's point, I think I think we're finally seeing CCaaS vendors get it that like the customer profile is kind of important. And like it should have been like way more part of the element for a longer time, because now that the AI stuff needs so much of that to actually do anything, in the CCaaS use case, you kind of need it. So I'm wondering, where's the real, is this, is someone's light bulb going to go off? We're going to see some interesting consolidation of some really big companies around this concept where the actual like data, the actual points of process, and then the actual points of communication need to be joined up even better.
Right.
Because the really cool things of like reverse prompt, the memory, the things that you're saying are great, but there's still elemental issues that a CCaaS doesn't just have, right? Yeah. It just has past interactions. It doesn't have a lot of like interesting like purchase information. It doesn't have that stuff still gets looked up, right? So until that's in there and in a much more fluid way, it's a lot of like, maybe the plumbing's there, but is the water going through? And that's really what's going to be interesting.
Because the question is, where are they getting the water? Right?
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Well, they didn't answer that question that I could see. So,
right. And I mean, I'll throw this to Simon, right? Like as someone who was, in certainly most recently, I think amongst all of us, had been in a vendor, right? And how many times has any contact center solution been embraced and loved? And anyone been skipping through the IT department to find the CIO sitting there hugging their, contract with their CCaaS vendor, being like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad CCaaS is in with the CIO now because finally I can connect all the data." Like, when was the last time you saw that happen, Simon?
Liz, let's talk about the reality of contact center, right? It's technology that the C-suite team wishes they never had to buy, that the staff wish they never had to engage with, and the customers wish they never had to use. It's not exactly,
womp womp.
It's geek, and the reality. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so that, but what Martin's talking about as well, I think is really important to recognise that even in the press and the data and all of the information that's been shared around Mpower in particular, there's some incredible suggestions around individualized memory graphs, taking things to the next level in combining contextual information to historical insights and what's going on now, and really doing something great with the conversation. But it's still, the thing that I feel like there's still an opportunity to do is that bridge to all that good content that's going on that is essential to be able to help a customer that sits in the CRM application. And so you want to hear about how CCaaS vendors are not just saying we can get integrated CRM applications. What you want to hear about is how they're obsessed with taking on that burden of making sure that the combinatorial benefits of these two really truly realizes the benefit of this artificial intelligence thing. There's not enough of that discussion going on, in my opinion. So I don't know what you guys think about that.
I was just going to say to go back to something Martin said about pricing too. This is something I've been looking at been thinking about when we start talking about usage, consumption, all those things. And there's this big gap that's starting to open up. You've got a couple of enterprise vendors who've gone, it should just be in there. Like, why am I charging extra for this? Zoho, Oracle, particularly. And of course, interestingly enough, both of them own their entire stack. So it's a little easier to scale when you don't have to pay somebody else for the compute power in the back. But I mean, I think that's going to be more and more the conversation. Like, should I pay extra for this thing in some way? And how do I do that? And is the pricing understandable or not? And I mean, even Salesforce did a pricing update and packaging update not long ago, although again, fairly complex. And I think this is just going to be a hot topic going forward for a while here until we figure it out.
Well, and Mike, that's a really good point about owning the stack, because if you as a vendor can't predict what your costs are going to be, how can a customer possibly do it? How do you
We've got a calculator. No, but Rebecca, we have a calculator. We built a calculator and it's really pretty.
I need an AI-driven calculator to figure that stuff out. Let me tell you.
Usage tiers. Come on, usage tiers.
It's the customer success. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that the interesting thing with NICE is that, I think when generative AI and, everything hit the scene and everyone went crazy and we all lost our minds and everyone chased the silver bullet down the path, NICE was one of those organizations when they said, look, we've been working on this for a really, really long time. You could really believe, you were like, okay, yes, there's documentable proof that you guys have been trying to crack this nut for a really long time. So when I look at the Enlighten platform, when I look at the capabilities across that, all of, to Simon's point, all of the ideas, all of the threads that they are pulling together when they have the data, when they have the access, when they have kind of the people on board that understand that this is not only an operational shift, but this is really a cultural shift of leaning into data, leaning into the customer, all of those things. When that perfect storm happens, like this, it's a solid platform to put all of those hopes and dreams on. I think the challenge is that a lot of customers are not necessarily ready for that big dream. And when it comes to then trying to I buy into the big dream and oh my God, now this is a really big price tag. There's a chasm there still that people want to get to the big dream. But quite frankly, they haven't even handled the fundamentals that we've all been talking about for the last 20 years when it comes to contact center and data. They haven't necessarily been able to tackle that or even swallow that price tag yet. So I'm a little bit concerned about the longevity of the dream, because I think what we're already seeing in CCaaS are people going and saying, I use the shift to cloud and I use the shift to data and AI, et cetera, as a big experiment that I signed up for maybe 5 years ago, 3 years ago. I signed a 2-year contract. I signed a 3-year contract. But I kept it in isolation. I only put some of my team on it. I put a division on it. I put a one call center on it. They haven't fully shifted their entire contact center operations into these CCaaS motions yet. They're really relying still on these hybrid motions. Is this kind of disillusionment around the cost of all of this, whether it's service, seats, AI, consumption, is that just going to drive all of this into this weird hybrid stagnation where we don't ever fully get to realize the goodness of everything's about to happen?
Yeah, because it's that and just the ownership of the project at a strategic level. And absolutely. You know what I mean? Because exactly to your point, Liz, I mean, it's not just the nature of how it's been done. It's who's owning this, who's being strategic with it. When we actually start to look at the water, where's this data coming from? Who owns that? Where, and then these continuation of marketing silos versus IT silos versus even, customer success. And so it's a CCO trying to work out with a CMO, working with the CIO to figure out how are you going to bring this together to make this stuff actually work. And good luck, right? Because, because a lot of this stuff's still looked at as a cost center. It's not looked at as a strategic investment center. Right. So it becomes, great, we could, but who's going to take on this budget? Who's going to take on this project and ownership and put themselves on the line for it? So not only is there that history of piecemeal toe dipping in the water of CCaaS, but it's who even owns it to make it an actual strategic cross-departmental end-to-end customer lifecycle thing that tells you things and has data from multiple touch points. I don't know. I don't have the answer there, but it just means it's not going to be easy.
Excellent. Lots of really great stuff there. And I do want to keep the ball rolling on this CCaaS topic and discuss a little bit about Microsoft's new standalone CCaaS platform, the Dynamics 365 Contact Center. Now, this news came out a couple of weeks ago now, but I do now the dust has settled, I do want to hear all of your thoughts on Microsoft finally making this jump into the CCaaS space and how it has done so. So I don't know who wants to kick us off on this.
If you're a mid-market organization, you're fully on Microsoft. If you're on, you're on 365, you're on, you've got Dynamics CRM, you're working with the whole stack. This is a nice little drop in to put in. Right. Exactly. But are you gonna is it the reality here is is this going to be the place where Microsoft lands and expands? Let's be honest. No. Like it just it's
Liz,
not.
hold on. Well, hold on a second. We just spent a
Counterpoint.
bit of time talking about the importance of combining CRM applications.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Right? That's the gap, okay? CCaaS vendors come along and go, here's the keys to the contact center, and we can integrate with all these CRM apps. Oh, look how big the library is. And the CRM guys are going, well, no, we're worrying about the importance of the business. And we can plug in some kind of voice capability to what you're already using. This is a big deal. The Microsoft Dynamics thing is wholeheartedly, quite purposefully addressing this challenge in a big way. And then adding to that the importance of the copilot approach to artificial intelligence. And I see a big difference, right? Virtual customer assistant, virtual agent assistant, heard tons of that. Copilot, where you could effectively use it as a buddy or as a mentor to improve what you're doing now and how you're doing it, and to expand that viewport of, you've got this application viewport to all the data. Suddenly, the edges of that just disappear because you're using a natural language interface. As part of we're purposely going after the equivalent of ServiceNow. That kind of approach, it is a big deal in my opinion. I'm
not saying that it's not a big deal. Let me just clarify, because I think that you may have jumped off at a certain point, and I totally get it, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's not a big deal. I'm saying that no one is going to trash their entire stack or estate for Microsoft CCaaS. Now, if you are a Microsoft estate, if you are looking in the vast majority, you're on, like, let's put it all together. You're on Azure, you're on Dynamics 365, right? So you're on their CRM. But most importantly, and let's be very honest, because it's not even the CRM that's important, that's the important part of this, you're on Office 365, where the vast majority of your people work is on the Microsoft estate, right? And you are bringing that all together. Dropping in this CCaaS, go do it. Like your CIO, and this is even more important than bring it all together. It's your CIO that's finally going to look at it and be like, hey guys, hey, remember that CCaaS argument we've had all this time? Maybe we should drop this one in, because the CIO is already orchestrating everything on Azure. They're pulling all the data in across that, across that data lake. They're looking at the estate differently now. And all of a sudden, CCaaS becomes part of that estate. That's a very, very attractive statement. But it's about where they work. And I think the importance of your point, Simon, is that it's where everyone in the organization works, not just where the contact center works. And we've been so focused on IVR, like to your point, we've been focused on all of these things specific to an agent, as opposed to an agent being an employee within the rest of our organization. It consolidates the view of work. It doesn't, I guess my concern here, though, is I think it's really easy to say that dropping this in, again, because we're talking suites, not platforms, so you can drop this suite in across the rest of your architecture. It doesn't necessarily mean all of your data is coming into one place, right? Because I think part of the challenge that Microsoft estate owners have had is that theoretically it does, but you then need all these different copilots to then bring all of this together. Right. Because again, AI is far more going to be about automation and being the buddy. But I think that when you leave the world of contact center, AI takes on and copilots take on a very different meaning. And quite frankly, they're table stakes. AI is the buddy, as the person who's optimizing work for that individual. It's table stakes across the industry right now, right? I think that where it gets really, really interesting for Microsoft and for a Microsoft tenant is now all of a sudden the pain of contact center may be eased. And I say maybe because we haven't seen if it's going to do it. Like I'm gonna hedge my bets on the maybe part, because CCaaS and voice and multi-channel telephony is never easy.
Yeah, and I think the point of the idea is great, right? If I'm Microsoft, I get it. Like, it's a great expansion play as you look at their customer base, sure. And from a Microsoft customer perspective, I guess it's not bad, but Liz, I think you hit on one of the things that really bothers me about their whole Copilot approach: the fact that they siloed all the Copilots. That each of them is unique to its own application and not across the whole whatever the whole may be. Right? I think that's a problem.
I think it comes down to confusion more than actually what they've done. To be honest with you, Michael, because
maybe
it's one of those things. I think if we all keep picking at the scab, like we'll get a Band-Aid. I'm hoping, but Copilots are going to sit on something like, Outlook, right? Where if your sellers, let's say you're in sales, and you're looking at the the Copilot for sales, that's going to be a scenario where you want that Copilot that's just sitting on Outlook, because that's where your seller is. Your seller maybe isn't, or someone is a non-traditional seller. Maybe it's someone who's selling, it's in the contact center. You're going to put that on their Outlook or wherever they're going to be. But within the Dynamics stack, like within this contact center, you're not adding Copilots on top of it. That AI, actually, ironically, to our first conversation about you just build it into the suite, right, is that the kind of the Copilot that's within the CCaaS suite is included in that. You're not adding another Copilot on top of it, because it is that mindset of AI should just be through this product. Now, if you have someone who has to be in a non-traditional or an informal contact center, you're going to go ahead and put that Copilot for service on top of the suite that they work in.
The Copilot thing across as you said, the contact center, the old factory floor contact center separated from the rest of the business is dead, right? It's about the disillusion of the front and back office divide, not working with the back office. You were supposed to now these are staff that are just part of the digital workplace, the entire workplace. And that's how you get that amplification effect of how they can be more effective with customers. And the Copilot thing is all about NLIs, natural language interfaces, expanding the ability to use more data. That's really the essence of it, isn't it? To be able to make more data more usable. And so it's the right path. That's the thing. It's the theme that I think is really important. It's the right path. And then in terms of the obsession with not just dynamic CRM, but we can integrate with all of your CRM applications, is also creating a bridge. So it's not just Microsoft customers that could buy it. Now, I'm not saying it's this, silver bullet or this kind of, extremely progressive CCaaS application. I just think the thinking is important. If I was to be advising CCaaS vendors right now, I'd be saying, look, guys, you need to be solving this problem of bringing these applications better together. Yes, Olivier at Genesis talks about CCaaS and the CRM app, all part of this important stack. I get that. But you've really got to be taking on more of solving the problem of these CIOs and CTOs that have got so many applications as part of this orchestra they're trying to create this symphony with. And the CCaaS CRM applications, I cannot believe I've even more recently heard who's going to win, the CRM vendor or the CCaaS vendor. It's like, no, I'm going to jump out the window if I hear that anymore. No, these guys are symbiotic. They need to work closer than ever before. And that's the important positioning when it comes to these technologies. How can you make both applications become even more capable applications by combining them in the right ways?
I mean, I think Simon, the one thing in what you were saying, I think that is important to look at here is the way they approach the way you interact with this, right? The idea that it's virtual assistant first. To me, that jumps out to me to say, I think that's how most applications should roll out in the future. I want that as the front end, and that's the natural language interaction with your data, with your system, with your process. So to me, that part really, I get it. I think that's a good move.
To Simon's point, I think we're going to see a lot more investment in partnerships like the one we saw with Genesis and Salesforce, and even with Genesis and ServiceNow, where they're understanding we've really got to bring all of this stuff together.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll stop seeing people trying to be, and again, just to Simon's point where they're saying which one's going to win. I think the even more disturbing conversation is when I hear the CCaaS vendor try to say, oh, well, we're going to be the one that replaces. Enter in other CX solution here, specifically the ones recently that are trying to become like marketing automation solutions because we've got a mail to, or we're going to take over all of multi-channel and omni-channel communications for the enterprise. I'm like, try to rip that out of a CMO's cold dead hands.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to happen. Like, you're not.
No.
Like all of a sudden the contact center solution, like the CMO isn't going to look at the contact center solution and be like, oh, where have you been all my life? Like it's not a chance. It's not happening. Right. So when they start to message like that, and it's like, it even goes beyond, Simon, your comment of like, oh, who's going to win, the CRM or the CCaaS? It's when the CCaaS is like, I'm going to come and eat the CRM. I'm like, you're not. Like, you're just not.
No, but similarly, why would you be, if you're a CRM vendor, why would you want to take on the margin hit in providing a global voice network? You're not going to do that, right? It's going to eat straight into your license in a big way. But yeah, these themes are just they're telling us something really important here. Be honest on this call. A couple of years back, when it comes to things like using your home devices and so on, and we started to see more of. I remember I went to the shop and I bought a couple of Echoes and so on. Back then, I was like, this is just a gimmicky thing. Now, how many of us just use them as though they're a natural part of our everyday?
Am I the only one that argues with mine? Like
you can
argue with mine. Like I get
be surprised.
Yeah, no one's surprised by this. Like no one should be shocked.
No, I'm not surprised at all.
It's 75 degrees.
Here, Liz, this is what you need. This is the rabbit. You can carry this with you all the time and argue 100% of your time. Think about that. How good is that?
Hello, new job. Yeah. But I think it's funny. Like Rebecca brought up the partnerships, and I do think that we're starting to see more of those, and I do think it's super interesting. But what I think is really interesting is one of the partners that everyone seems to be gravitating towards is because of the CRM aspect of it with Salesforce. Salesforce, on the other hand, with its CCaaS solution, partnered with AWS, of course, to provide its telephony because it didn't want to take on, to Simon's point, the quagmire known as voice, right? It could take on everything else. So when you start to look at these, like when you start to look at all these partnerships, it is a very odd web of tentacles that are all kind of flowing into all these different little places. You look at Microsoft, you look at their CCaaS, you look at anything across their Dynamics portfolio, anything across their, like the Copilot portfolio, they're always like, integrates with Dynamics and Salesforce. Like they specifically went after that Salesforce connection for a very, very specific reason, right? Yeah. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting as these partnerships continue to unfold. Just which ones are the most powerful? Is it more powerful to partner with the CRM? Or again, to Rebecca's point, was it more powerful to partner with the workflow engine, like a ServiceNow, right? Is it more important to look at how work is getting through and where the customer is going and where the work of customer is going? Or is it more important about that transactional record? And I think that is going to be the strategy that starts to separate where CCaaS integrates more fully, to Simon's point, into that total stack and into that total process.
I mean, what SAP buying WalkMe was an interesting move.
That one, they telegraphed that one from the minute. I know this wasn't on the list. Charlie's like, SAP, Sapphire was not on the list. We're not going there. But one quick note about that, man, that was telegraphed from from the very opening keynote before the announcement was even made. It was like, we have to understand digital adoption they said it over and over and again, right? If you don't adopt it, if it's not getting used, if you're not using any of the solutions, AI won't mean anything. Saying you have AI isn't going to do anything if no one's actually using the rest of the platform and the rest of the solution. Yeah. And then they came out with the
announcement. That's been a problem for how long?
Right.
Can I jump back in and say one other thing about the CRM thing? Because to me, it's not just realizing all these ambitions of AI. You understand people, you understand the things that motivate them to then be able to do something clever with these experiences. But now you're taking it further. Gartner talks about all sorts of technology trends. One of them that I think stands out is industry clouds, where there's applications and capabilities that are specific to a certain industry. Yeah. And so not only is it about and to Rebecca's point, we've all been agreeing here, the ServiceNow Genesis thing was a big deal to me. It's solving that problem for buyers in terms of bringing these together. But then you can start to realize the potential of things like industry-focused applications and technologies too, to up-level, beyond this generic customer experience touchpoint thing. But now in a finance industry or retail industry, taking it even further. And it's just, this is an exciting industry to be in right now. There's so much great stuff going on, but I'm really interested in the themes here. And I think those that can edge out, that will edge out, are those that are thinking about this combinatorial innovation. It's not a new thing. And then being able to start to support more in terms of the industry focus. I think TalkDesk do some industry cloud stuff that's quite interesting. So yeah, there's some
before Gen AI, that's where everyone was going, right? Remember all the sessions we all used to have to sit in. I mean, remember it was like Salesforce was like, you get an industry,
with multi model LLMs, right? And
right.
small.
But before Gen AI, before the madness happened, everyone was marching. Simon, to your point, everyone was marching to those industry clouds, right? I mean, like you couldn't go to a conference without hearing, and now we're going to revolutionize everything by going to industry. And we were like, but the guys last week said that they were going to industry. Right? Everyone's saying it.
We saw Siebel do it. We saw everyone do it. Yeah. And it always works.
Buyers love it, right? If you're a procurement team, let's think about a buyer. It's not a person. It's a team of people, and you get presented with something. Oh yeah, but we've done this in banking, right? Well, you're going to go towards the top of the list. It's you just made my job easy as a buyer. So yeah, I mean, this
is for me.
So all these themes, exactly.
I want obscure industries though. I want obscure industry cloud. I don't want. I'm tired of seeing for medical, for travel and hospitality, for finance. I want someone to come out and be like, we're going to specialize in obscure industry clouds, and then I'm going to be super stoked. But we'll see.
With the part-time yoga instructor cloud.
I was going to say the first dog grooming cloud. I love it.
That's like what Infor did with their micro verticals. Remember?
Wonderful. So yeah, again, lots of excellent conversation there. But I do want to move on to our third and final topic of the day, and that is this week's announcement of the Salesforce LLM Benchmark. This allows service and sales teams to test various LLMs across numerous CRM use cases. So yeah, it's a great story, I think, as Salesforce said, a world first. But Martin, I don't know if you could start by sharing your thoughts.
Well, kind of just what I was talking about before is, we're getting to a point where it's not just, are you going to be using Gen AI, which is powered by LLMs, right? Are you going to be using some small, some mid-sized, some large language, some industry-focused ones, proprietary, public? So in using this multi-model approach, you are going to have to make some decisions, and having tools that guide you to which are going to give you the most complete, the most relevant, the least the least toxic kind of responses in what you're doing, and make the most sense for your business, your industry, you as an individual, right? That makes a lot of sense, because we're getting to that tipping point where everybody is touching some form of LLM powered AI in the business world. And we have to kind of start taking a step back and not just blindly trusting public LLMs and not just doing work on proprietary. There is a middle, it's not even just a middle ground, it's multi-ground. So it makes a lot of sense that, we're actually getting to this meta layer of actually figuring out which ones we should be incorporating. And the more, I think, which would be important is how it comes back with suggestions for guardrails, suggestions for use, suggestions for the right kind of use of these, and that type of, because we're still looking for that type of really trusted guidance. And Salesforce's mantra for how many years now has been trust this, trust that, trust layer. So how that comes in with the trust layer will be really interesting, because people are getting that they need to be doing more, but they still need guidance. They still need guardrails. They still need to be doing this with some sort of structure that isn't just Wild West, right? So I think it's smart. I think it solidifies that trusted vendor, trusted platform layer for them in a good way.
And I mean, I think the thing that you have to realize, there are a lot of LLM benchmarks out there. So this is not like, oh, this is the first one that's ever out there. Go to Hugging Face. You'll see a whole ton of them. But the important thing is, this is contextual benchmark, right? This is the part that's different, and I think really, really important, because, as Martin, you said, each activity has different requirements, and frankly, a different language model or set of language models working together is going to solve your problem. So if you can't evaluate them in the context of how you're going to use them, how are you going to know until so you might as well just test a whole bunch of them and figure, that's not a reasonable way to approach it. So I think the idea is good. And I feel like, as it grows more, it's certainly going to be a big, useful thing for customers to try to figure out what's the best fit. What does actually solve my problem?
And let's face it too, Salesforce is doing all of this research today anyway, as are most of the vendors that are dealing with all of these different models. Right. So why not expose that to customers in a way that customers can really understand it? I will say what I'd love to hear is some partnerships around this. Right. Yeah. So I have the benchmark model, but does this then become part of some of the other partnerships that Salesforce has across the ecosystem, right? Where same folks have access to looking at this data and being able to add more use cases and context to it.
Yep. It's funny that watching kind of the progress of it. Right, is because I think everyone's kind of going on this progress, right? Where it was like, here's your LLM, right? Like here's OpenAI. Let's be honest, here's OpenAI, right? Like everyone's using ChatGPT,
right?
But then as we brought in all the other LLMs, as platforms brought in the capacity to bring your own, right? You could bring your own for Bedrock. As you look at the Salesforce ecosystem, you can not only bring your own, but then you have all of the proprietary, all of the other partnerships they have. They've really built out a very sophisticated AI ops and ML ops kind of stack that sits within Salesforce and has the trust layer and all of those different things. But I think what was really interesting about this is, one, this is research that was not done off of synthetic data. And I think when you start to look at some of the other benchmarking tools out there, they're using synthetic data, which in and of itself is not necessarily the best rooting point if you're looking for business velocity, the velocity of decisions you need to make around business, right? You need to be using real data that is either coming from the vast majority, like the collective of people who are using Salesforce as CRM, or your data specifically. Like you're getting down to a RAG looking at your specific CRM data and looking at how this benchmarks against it. I think that the most important thing though, and it's both super important, but it's also kind of a little bit dangerous when it comes to how it gets applied, is that cost is also included in this benchmark, right? Because it's one thing to say, this is the best, the fastest, the most accurate. This is like the holy grail, to steal from another overly used and bloated word. The holy grail of LLM benchmarks. We can say that, but if it's also going to literally bankrupt your company because of the amount of compute that it takes, the amount of data that it takes, all of a sudden it doesn't become the right AI, the right LLM for your business. So the cost is really important. The thing that worries me about that, though, is that unlike someone who is a sophisticated data researcher or someone who is really deep into AI ops that really understands this, it's going to Hugging Face, that's also looking at the benchmark and saying, okay, well, what is the community now saying about this LLM, or looking at how those are ranked? Are they just going to look at cost? And those organizations that are just going to kind of nickel and dime this, unfortunately, and are going to be like, I'm just going to go with the one that's kind of accurate because I'm okay with kind of accurate, but is super cheap because that's all I have the budget for. Wow, you're going to get some really bad recommendations and horrible customer experiences because history has shown us people will pick low budget and ignore the CX strategy and what happens while still touting that we're obsessed with our customers, right? We'll still paint that on our walls that CX is going to drive our business forward, but we're going to pick the cheapest model that kind of gets it done. And that's when benchmarking concerns me a bit because, let's be honest, not everyone picks the right benchmark.
Yeah, cost to accuracy, cost to performance. I think that's interesting, this, because you're right. Cost by itself, not great. Cost with performance, better. Cost with performance and accuracy, even better. It's like Anthropic's launch of Claude 3 versions the last time they released. I think that was great, right? This one performs better. This one costs more. This one costs not much. I think that's a way to approach it, right?
We've all said it. It's strategy. Do you have an AI strategy? Do you have a data strategy? And it's where all of these. I mean, we're coming back to Simon's earlier point of when all of this comes together, right? Which is, if you have an AI strategy where you've actually had that conversation of like, what are we actually trying to achieve by applying all of this? We've looked at the benchmark, therefore we can make the decision. If you're bringing in all of your CRM, your CX, your data, your AI strategy, well, you're like the king of all or queen of all CIOs. Like, let's just be honest there, because you've had those conversations and not many have been able to. But it is where all of that strategy comes together.
Yep. I think there's also something I'm going to throw a little bit, not a curveball, but when it comes to the consumption of these models, You've also got, I don't know if you've seen the research from generative AI deployment models that Gartner's put out. There's these 5 columns, 5 pillars from buy to build that I think are really interesting. Does a great job of simplifying how you consume or make use of generative AI in particular. And you've got effectively embedding in apps where you just use it. Then you've got embedded it with apps but use custom app framework API. So now you're abstracting from the application. Then you're starting to look at data retrieval as part of what you're building that's been embedded. And then the 4th pillar is about fine-tuning, and this is penultimately before you decide to build your own foundational model. And the fine-tuning area for me is where all the excitement and the focus is going to be, and that requires like model hubs and so on, being able to test over AI strength, AI health, drift, decay, running simulations, and then doing tuning to complement what you might use out of the box. This is where things are going to get really interesting, or already are, and are going to start to build out. So this is entirely relevant, but I'm actually quite interested in how it forms part of the if Salesforce will want you to recognize the importance of what it's doing with its own models, and that is going to be clearly, why wouldn't you want to make sure that as an ambition, look at all of this and look at what we're doing. It should help to sell or demonstrate the value of what they're providing. But there's a much bigger picture here that is important to recognize, I think, around how people are going to shift from not just using foundational models, but starting to fine tune to almost You remember when I used to deploy a Siebel Systems application back in 2001, and there'd be about 10,000 lines of code written by a bunch of developers that thought they could make it look a lot better. This is the world we're going to start to creep into, in my opinion, around large language models. It's not going to be.
I think the interesting thing from Salesforce too is that it's not even just that. What I'll say is it's not even just that what they're doing with models, because I think that's a great point, Simon, of like, hey, we've really been thinking through this and we've got a really smart approach to how these models are coming together and what you can select and what works for your business. But it was the order in which Salesforce did everything, right? Because if you remember, the heavy plumbing and the heavy lifting around Data Cloud really has opened up their capacity to be able to do any of this. It is why they can say things like, we're not going to use synthetic data. This is going to come from real world CRM data. Right. It's because they have streamlined Data Cloud to be able to ingest everything, even from, whether it's a third party solution, So because they got their data house in order and really went through that heavy lift, they also now have vector database that sits on top of that. So they don't just have that Data Cloud layer. They don't have, and that Data Cloud layer, of course, built on top of the AWS clean room layer. So like all of the heavy lifting and the sausage making that they did on the data stuff that we were all kind of sitting around scratching our heads, like, why does it suddenly seem like really vitally important that they get all these things? And why put in all the work for a vector database? Like, what? That's a lot of work. Like, why make that investment? Now you see this coming together with the AI. Like, this becomes a very different Salesforce story than even what we've said in the past, right? This becomes a story about actual integration of the stuff that makes all of the applications work. Like, they're really shifting their mindset around that again. I mean, suites over platforms, right? Like we've been saying it a couple times here. But I think that it's that Data Cloud story that suddenly becomes super interesting when you say it along with the AI. Like, absolutely, they're doing interesting stuff. They're getting all that organized. But what they've done on the Data Cloud side, you got to tell that story together. And all of a sudden you're like, ooh, now I know how you've been able to do it. And that's pretty cool.
Salesforce is great at making us feel safer as buyers, right? They're really good. They're good at that, right? It's an ecosystem. You've got the speed to value app, or you can extend it by coloring it pink or whatever, however you want with a get it now extended app from a partner. Or you can build what you think good looks like with Force.com. We've got you covered, right? They're great at making it easy to invest in what they're doing. And this is another good example. We're going to demystify the LLM thing for you. That's so powerful, just being able to do that. And again, to my earlier point, it then facilitates what is the next level of what can be achieved with these large language models that we all want to hear more about. I want to hear less about the generic, applications of these, and more about solving real problems and addressing real ambitions that customers have delivered by this combinatorial.
But can we give them a round of applause for not putting an animal on it? Can we just Just for a second, like just a little one, because like they could have, like Data Cloud had a rabbit, but like it's been a while, it's been a hot second since we've seen another animal, and I just got to say, like we've kind of stuck with, like, you know, we've stuck with Einstein, and that's really good, but like they could have, you know, that there was someone with muscle memory in the org that was like, can we make it into a butterfly? Like, you know, someone was thinking it.
Awesome. Well, I think that's probably a great place to start there. Although it is a fascinating trend, just seeing kind of how this fine-tuning process and optimization is occurring. So I don't think I've seen a new Gen AI use case in, like, especially in contact centers, which I focus on most, in a few months now. And this mostly all the effort is going on to optimizing kind of use cases that are already out there. So yeah, I think it's a fascinating conversation, but yeah, as I said, a great place to end today's chat. So thanks to all of our expert analysts for joining me, and thank you all for watching too. Bye for now.